Are you thinking of purchasing a new construction home for the first time or for the fifth time? Well, today's video is perfect for you. This is part one of a two-part series regarding 3 mistakes to avoid when purchasing new construction. Now, make sure you stick around. This one is money in the bank. If this is your first time to the channel, or if you've been here a ton of times, my name is Yadi Karina Jones, and I'm a real estate agent with Lifestyle International Realty here in Charlotte and the surrounding areas. Today, I'm changing it up a little bit. I typically talk to you about neighborhoods or new construction communities, but today I'm sharing what it's like to purchase new construction and what you need to avoid. So stick around. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, consider doing that right now so that you can learn what it's like to live, work, and play here in Charlotte. Now, let's find out what these 3 mistakes are. So mistake number 1 is going to be not hiring a realtor. Now, I know what you're thinking. Of course she has to say that because she's a realtor. And truth be told, if you are considering purchasing a home in Charlotte, North Carolina, I would love to work with you and be a resource for you. But today I'm coming to you as a person who has walked in your shoes, and 9 years ago, we purchased a new construction property. So I know exactly what the process is like. Now, we did not hire a realtor at that time, not because we didn't want to, but it was more out of ignorance and not understanding the value that a realtor would have brought to this experience. So I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you should hire a realtor. One of those reasons is that when you walk into a new construction community, the sales agents that are present are not there for you. They're there for the builder. They are representing the best interests of the builder, and their job is to close you on purchasing a new construction property with them. So in order for you to be on a somewhat level playing field, you should have your own representation. And that brings me to my second point. The builder already factors in the fee that it costs to hire your buyer's agent. So they're either going to have a flat fee or a percentage that the buyer's agent is receiving to represent you. So in other words, you are not coming out of pocket to be able to get someone to walk side by side with you in this process. Now, I'm telling you this because if you walk into the builder's community without representation and you provide basic information, even basic information, much worse, if you sign a contract with them that day, they will not allow you to be represented by an agent. So it is very important that prior to you going to view new construction communities, you hire someone that you're comfortable working with. And this person should be someone that understands new construction because it is different from resale. Now, a third reason that a buyer's agent or a realtor would be helpful in this process is because they can be your boots on the ground. So most people are working to be able to afford their homes. So they don't have the kind of time that it takes to be on top of visits or to check in with the builder, to see the inspections go through. I have had to go to inspections for clients and they weren't present because they are working. They have other obligations that they have to meet in order to be able to qualify for this home. So I'll give you an example. My own personal home, I walked through. At the time, I was not a realtor, and I also wasn't working. So I had plenty of time to check in on my property. One day when I arrived, I was looking in the boxes, just kind of wondering what's going on here. And the boxes actually had subway tile in them, which was the correct thing. That's what we had ordered. But the bathroom that was supposed to be getting gray tile was actually about to get white tile, and vice versa. So when I saw that, I immediately went over to the foreman and the person working there and just asked them the question, hey, by the way, I noticed that the boxes are in the wrong bathroom. Is that because you're intending to put that subway tile in that bathroom, which is what I was imagining? And I was correct. I also happen to speak Spanish, so I was able to communicate very well with the crew. And so I was able to rectify that issue. But had I not been on the premises, they would have put up the tile in the wrong bathroom, and then I would have been fighting with the builder to get that corrected. So a real estate agent could be essential in the sense that you could be at work and they could be navigating some of these issues for you. Mistake number 2 is not asking enough questions prior to signing the contract. Now, when realtors are helping a buyer purchase a resale home, in other words, a home that has already been lived in, we typically use a standard contract here in North Carolina. However, builders tend to not use that contract. They have their own contract, and the contract that we typically work with is somewhere around 16, 17 pages. But builders have a contract that can be well over 100 pages. I am not kidding. Some of these contracts are extremely long. They're written by their attorneys. They are there to protect the builder, not to protect you. So you have to ask a lot of questions prior to signing this contract. For instance, one of the questions that is a good question to ask is, if the materials or the cost of labor goes up for you, will that be reflected in my contract? So after I sign this contract and we settle on a price, are you able, does the contract allow you to increase the price? Now, the sales agent is not going to lie to you if that is the case. They are going to say yes or no. Typically, the answer is going to be no. But during the pandemic, there were some builders that were raising their prices, and they had that in their contract. So there was not a thing that you could do about it. Another question that you can ask is, what if the inspection comes back with high radon results? What do you do? Do you mitigate that? What is your response to that? So these are things that you're going to want the sales agent to point out in the contract. And let me just back up a little. Typically, when you're signing a contract, it is done via DocuSign or some online platform. And so things are moving quickly. They're explaining things quickly. And even though you and your agent might be on the call, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of pages, and they're kind of skimming through it. One way around that is I have had clients ask to get the PDF prior to signing the contract, or to get the PDF after they've discussed the contract before they sign it. So you want to get this before you sign it if that builder is willing to do so. In this case, they were, and she was able to read through it. She actually caught a couple of things which worked in her favor. So now you can also ask questions like, can I park my RV or my boat in the driveway? Because if that's important to you and the HOA regulations are not going to allow that, then that's something you need to know prior to signing the contract. I had a client that asked, were they allowed to garden, right? Because gardening was important to them, and that was something that the community did not allow. So this allowed her to make a decision. She ended up moving forward, but that was because she decided she could do some raised beds. So if there are things that are important to you, you need to know that. Another one that's important, do you allow inspections? Typically, the answer is always going to be a resounding yes. So the third-party inspector is going to be allowed to come in. Sometimes they have to have a certain level of insurance. I have heard many builders say it has to be more than $1 million. So that is something to take into consideration, but you need to ask these questions prior to signing the contract. As well as another question that's a good one is, what if I change my mind? What if underwriting doesn't go well? Do I get my money back? Now, in the state of North Carolina, you typically give 2 deposits when you place an offer. One is due diligence and one is earnest money. In this case, with builders, new construction doesn't do that. They have what's called a builder's deposit or earnest money. And so sometimes if you are working with their lender, they will allow you to get the earnest money back if for some reason you are denied financing. But these are all questions that are important to ask ahead of time so you don't sign something and the builder has required $20,000 from you, $15,000, $10,000, and then you cannot get your money back. So this is also an area where a realtor can be super helpful because they've been able to navigate these conversations prior to you, so they kind of know some questions that sometimes our clients ask the amazing questions and sometimes it's us. So that paired together gives that realtor an experience that they can then bring to the table with you so that you get the best experience possible. Mistake number 3 is not hiring a third-party inspector. Now, it can actually seem strange to have to hire an inspector for a new construction home. But let's be real, people make mistakes. And oftentimes the builders are using subcontractors and sometimes they just don't get it right. So it's very, very important to hire a third-party inspector. In fact, to me, sometimes it's even more important to hire one in the new construction process than in the resale process. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. You should always hire a third-party inspector. But basically, the builder does allow you to bring in an inspector most of the time. Whether they have restrictions is going to be dependent on the builder. So some builders require the inspector to have $1 million in insurance or over that, just in case they damage something during the inspection process. But for the most part, they are going to allow you to bring this person in. Now, the other thing is that some builders are very strict about how much time they give you to schedule this person. So if that's the case, then you or your realtor has to be on top of that because they'll say, hey, you have to get them in by Friday or by Thursday, and then you're scrambling to find an inspector. I've had this happen to me. In my case, I have an excellent relationship with the inspector I typically use. So he usually squeezes me in. So I haven't had an issue with this, but some builders are very tough when it comes to this. And it makes sense, right? Because it's not in their favor to bring this third-party inspector. Now, you should bring this third-party inspector twice throughout the process. And the reason why is because if you are building early enough and the walls are still open, so you're still in the framing process, there's going to be a point where the agent or the superintendent of the transaction will say, okay, we're ready for your inspector to come in. At this point, electrical is in, plumbing is in, framing is done, HVAC units are typically in, and so they will be able to give the home a once-over to really get a sense if things are being done up to code and if the property is structurally sound. Once they close those walls, you will not be able to see a lot of these things. So I'll give you an example. I had an inspector come out and one of the trusses was broken in the roof line. And so it was repaired. However, he was able to give us the information of make sure you have a letter from a structural engineer so that in the future, if you ever sell this home and this comes up on the inspection, you have this letter guaranteeing that a structural engineer said that the repairs were adequate and that the home is safe. The second time you're going to use this inspector is going to be post that drywall going in. So the drywall is going to go in, and you're going to want that person to make sure that all of the equipment throughout the house is working, the plumbing is working well, the HVAC system, the appliances, that everything in that home is structurally sound. So you want to have this person come in twice. Now, one thing about inspectors is my inspector does try to call it out when it's very severe, but they typically do not call out cosmetic issues. So something like nail pops or little cracks or things like that that do not impact the structure. Sometimes they don't call it out. So that is where you need to also be, eyes and ears open to see things that you want addressed by the builder, but that the inspector may not have called out. However, it is essential for you to get an inspector. The other reason I love having an inspector on new construction is because I've never had a builder not complete all the things that the inspector asked for. Typically, my inspector calls out things that are important for code. For example, there was one time he called out some L brackets that he wanted to see with cross bracing and things like that. And we were able to get that done. The builder did not push back on it. The builder is typically, because they have all the trades on hand, so they're typically very, very open to making sure that this part is right? Because they want to make sure that the home is sound too. And sometimes they don't know. The superintendent doesn't always know what their subcontractors are doing because they're not always around, or they may be taking care of a different property. Something else may be more a priority. There may be closings that are happening that week, and there may be a lot of closings that they're focusing on, and they're not paying attention to their subcontractors. And this third-party inspector is going to be your saving grace. So make sure that you hire one, and they're going to cost anywhere. It could be $400, it could be $600, and if you do it twice, of course, you could be looking at $800, but they are worth every penny because they are going to, that report that they send to you is going to be the thing that the builder is going to lean on as a person that is professional, because you, or most people, right? I don't know either. Most people do not know code the way inspectors or general contractors know code, right? So the code books are long. I did code enforcement classes. Those code books are very extensive, very long, and there's one for each category. So there's electrical, plumbing, HVAC, gas. There are a lot of codes, and it's hard to remember all of them. So you need somebody on your side that does this day in and day out. If you're thinking about buying new construction here in Charlotte or the surrounding areas, I would love to be a resource for you. My name is Yadi Karina Jones. I also work in South Carolina. So feel free to give me a call or text or connect with me via Zoom using the contact information below. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.